All right. Howdy, everyone. This is the Quality Matters Business Visionaries live stream. So what we are going to be doing today is another book club review. So it'll be fun. I'm, again, Kyle Chambers. I'm with Texas Quality Assurance. And I want to introduce you to the rest of the group again here. So, Steve.
Yeah. Hey, guys. Good to see you again. Steve Lewis, Eternal Energy. We develop and execute growth strategies for companies that are IP-backed and energy-related.
Cool.
All right.
Rob?
Rob Thompson, working with Berkman International, and we work with organizations to help develop their most important asset, their people.
And we have a guest this week. Steve, you want to introduce our guest?
Well, he needs no introduction.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invite. Excited to be here, talking to very knowledgeable people here. So my name is Alex Burgos. I've been working mainly on technology projects, global projects in Asia and Europe, North and South America. So excited to be here and discuss this great book we have today.
And you've used these OKRs before, right?
Yes, of course. So, or something similar to it.
Well, Steve, this was your selection this week. So go ahead and tell everyone what Measure What Matters is all about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really like this book, and it took me back to when I was in corporate, and we would have to do objective settings and then do these annual performance reviews based on those, and everyone hated them. And my premise, like you just said, I think we've all used this before, these concepts. We just call it something else.
Right.
So this came about from started at Intel, and there was a CEO who's named Andy Grove.
Yeah.
He was the third CEO of Intel. He's also the third employee of Intel.
Really?
I
didn't realize that fact.
Yeah, that's a good, a nice fun fact from Steve.
Started in 1968, and he is widely credited for helping advance the entire Silicon Valley.
Right.
With some semiconductors and microchips.
They might not have been the first one at it, but they're really the first ones to get big and to run and drive the industry, and everyone chased them for decades.
That's right.
Well, it still does. AMD gets sort of competes, but only in real niche areas.
Yeah. Now Intel does about $80 billion a year, and so when he was there, John Doerr started Intel back in I think the early 70s, and now John Doerr is famous. He's a Rice alum.
Yeah.
Big VC guy. He's credited for helping start Google and Amazon
and all. Yeah.
Slack, there's a whole bunch.
Yeah.
And he ended up being the best salesperson at Intel. And he attributes that to the use of OKRs, which is objectives and key results. And so when objectives being, here's what we need to do, and key results are how we're going to do it.
It is such an insanely simple idea, you'd almost dismiss it.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's absolutely fantastic. When you first suggested the book, I was like, Measure What Matters. Okay, so I'm thinking like, KPIs. I'm thinking, tons of data collection and metrics and everything. I didn't realize what this book actually was till I started reading it, because at a previous company I worked at, I guess was maybe 2012, 2013, we had so many continual improvement projects we were working on, because we just put, our 9001 and 14001 and 45001 systems in place. We're building new facilities. We're adding a coatings line, a new blasting facility. Like, we've got stuff going on out the wazoo, and we couldn't finish anything. We'd get like 80% to the project complete and kind of halt. And so I'm doing my own research, trying to figure out, like, how do we actually just finish something? How do we get to the finish line? And so I saw what Google had done. I didn't even realize at the time it came from Intel. I just knew it was something that Google did. And they called it OKRs. And so, of course, this is before the book, but way after the methodology was a thing. And so I'm in, we're having this big meeting. We've got all of our production supervisors in there. We've got, engineers. We've got welders in there, like everything. And so here I'm trying to talk about objectives and key results. I'm talking about what Google does. And I didn't think this through before I came into the meeting. And I'm like, we don't give a crap about Google. We weld. We're blasting. We're coding stuff. We don't care about Google. And so one of the guys in the meeting, he was one of their production supervisors. He chimed in saying, this is just a waste. We don't need to be doing this. I'm like, oh, man, this is derailed. This didn't go the way I wanted it to go. And I said, well, Brian, what do we need to do? He said, we just need to get shit done around here. And I
Mhm.
said, great. That's what we're going to call this. So to this day, they still have their active GSD project list, their get
Mhm.
shit done list.
Hey, it's all about presentation.
I'm stealing that.
So as soon as we named it GSD, oh man, they're on board with it. Yeah, we need to get shit done.
Absolutely. And to your point about bringing it in there and talking about it, one of the ideas I heard while I was going through this was that a great way to do it is present it like a vegetable. Vegetables, especially with your kids, they push back like, I don't want to eat vegetables. But you just got to tell them you need to eat vegetables because they're good for you.
Right.
And it may not taste great. It may not be the best thing ever. But at the end of the day, it's going to be good for you.
Yeah.
Perfect analogy. Absolutely.
But yeah, it worked out really, really well for us there. And, very recently, we decided, okay, look, we're getting to a large enough scale here, TQA, that we need to do the same thing, Steve, when you got here, Caleb and I were sitting here for, 2 hours before that, hammering out ideas. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? But it's the same thing. We sat down here a couple of weeks ago and said, all right, well, here's all of our OKRs. Here's all of our key objectives. Here's what we want to do this quarter. Here's kind of our stretches. And, really did a lot to figure it out.
And I think one of the key things you talked about the stretches, and I've heard it for years that from I have a sales background, operations, quality, and sales. But in the sales world, Grant Cardone talks all the time about the 10X rule.
Yes.
You know what? Better to set goals that are way above what you think you can do and hit 60% of it than set a goal that you think is more reasonable and just fall short of that. Yeah. And I think of Elon Musk. Guy's crazy, right? He just has these goals, but then he keeps hitting a lot of them.
Yeah.
And for instance, like going to Mars.
Yeah.
If you set your goal to go to Mars, and even if you don't hit that goal, if you make it like 50% of the way there, you probably come up with a lot of cool stuff along the way.
Yeah. It's funny. He built his own rocket, built his own electric car, and then strapped his car onto his rocket.
And sent it into space. Yeah. It's just ridiculous. So I think I'd be curious to see how he measures or approaches this, even with his own objectives, because he sets these insane objectives, and it almost seems like he doesn't have any limiter on the types of objectives he does. Like he came up with the crazy flamethrower.
Yeah, not a flamethrower.
What was it?
Not a flamethrower.
Not a flamethrower.
Because flamethrowers are technically illegal. But the way he built this, it circumvents all those.
It's like a fire gun. It's a fire gun then, okay? Maybe not a flamethrower, but a fire gun from the Boring Company.
Yeah. Well, you made a point here about, even if you hit 60% of your goal, you're still doing good. So this is one of the things I absolutely loved about this book is they went into so many real world examples of what folks did. That is my number one pet peeve with these business and improvement type books is it's so much theory with so little practical. And I just absolutely truly love all of the individual examples you get to hear from the actual people that have implemented it. And so you hear like 4 or 5 different ways that it's implemented. And I love that. I love those practical examples. And that was one of the things they talked about with Google. And when we did this meeting here as well, and, Darcy's sitting in on the meeting, and I said, look, we do not actually want to attain 100% on everything. And she's just like ready to pull her hair out. She's like, you don't want to hit your goals? I'm like, no, we want to hit our goals. But if we're hitting every single key result 100%, we were pretty lazy when we set our goals.
Sandbag.
Yeah,
that's right.
And that happened. We had it was very demotivating for our team the way we had done our goals one year at corporate, and where we made it, we didn't really explain to them that 70% was good. You want to be at 70%. That means you didn't sandbag. You also did what you had to do.
Well, and we're real quick, because not everyone may know the term sandbagging. If you're not working some of the sales project managers, so what's sandbagging?
Well, in our industry, especially when you tie some objectives to your compensation, if you're going to set what that goal is, then you're going to set it low.
Yeah. So
that you make sure you hit it. So anyway, we had it so that 70% was great.
Sure.
And so I remember I had an engineer, he had 40 plus years experience. he got a 70 something. He came to me almost in tears saying, Steve, I've never made a 70 on anything in my life. And I can't believe I'm making this now. And I had to try to explain to him, no, like 70, that's a great score. So it can have a negative effect if you don't explain it well, right? Yeah. And what this book does time and time again is it talks about when you're going to set these objectives, make sure that, yes, they're agreed, that they're transparent, that they are challenging. But yeah, it's very, so you mentioned simple and well understood of what you're trying to achieve and what those all mean.
Well, I mean, again, because I come from a software development background. So if you're going to, and actually I'm in the process of making our own software tool to track these internally to get above the Excel spreadsheet, right? But it's so simple. You have very few fields that you worry about. You have your objective. You have maybe 3 to 5 key results. And then you have a description column that says, here's what success looks like. And then you have a score that you rate on a 0 to a 1. That's it.
Nice and simple.
Yes.
The one thing that I've been running constantly in the project world is that the objectives are usually set, right? They're ambitious, they are inspiring, and sometimes they're specific, clear, and simple to understand. However, what I see is that we don't follow through, and we don't do the stewardship during the execution. So one thing that has been very successful for us is make sure that is measurable. Whatever progress we set, whatever goals we are targeting, we need to measure those as we execute,
right?
And not wait until the end of the project to see whether we succeed or not.
So how do you manage, because you've worked on these global projects, this was something that I ran into before. This is something we very quickly ran into here, is everyone wants to tie every key result to the next objective down the line, to the next key result down the line. They want it all to be nice and perfectly linked, and there's no necessity for anything to link. How do you handle explaining that to folks? Because I've not done well with that one. And especially because I'm a computer guy, right? So like A has to lead to B, B has to lead to C. Exactly. Right? We can't have any dead ends. We can't have any gaps and skips, but that works well with this system. So how do you explain that to folks?
Well, there's a lot of variables there, right? Which part of the world are you working? The culture, the corporate culture. There are so many different key factors, like the size of the organization, the corporate culture, the industry, the market stability at any given point, and we're into oil and gas, and you know what's going on with us right now. So it has to. There's a lot of factors. I can tell you one example. Sometimes I had a one specific project, very aggressive project, and I had the same meeting, the same presentation with people in China, people in Germany and France. Same presentation, same everything, scope, and the dynamics in the meeting were completely different.
Interesting.
The Germans, they looked like they were asking aggressive questions. They looked like they were pissed off, but they were not. It's just their nature. It's their culture. They're very demanding, and they want to know why. What the hell are we doing, and why are we doing this? Chinese, on the other hand, they were very polite. They were just nodding their heads, staying quiet, and it wasn't until the highest rank of the group start talking, and everybody started talking. The French, they were talking over each other. So, to your point, you have to.
No Italians?
No, I went to Italy, but I didn't have that meeting there. So yeah, there's so many variables. It is interesting to see, and you have to adjust to those things. And create a solid framework.
Well, one of the distinctions they make, because I was always going to it, I was calling them KPIs my whole career, and I had trouble probably kind of describing what the difference was between KPIs and OKRs, and I read something where John had said that someone said that KPIs are numbers without soul and context.
Yes.
So I said, okay, well then maybe OKRs do have those qualities about them, in the fact that they are where KPIs might be top down, kind of retrospective, and very hierarchical, and annual. Yeah, we would we would do this huge exercise of putting all these objectives and KPIs together, and we put it in the drawer and not look at it for a whole year.
Right.
And that's the worst thing you can do. Whereas now with OKRs, you're always looking at them and always and you can always change them too.
Yes.
Mhm.
Whereas you don't need to be changing your KPIs. They really need to be static year over year. And, as you can think about when I put this into place at the previous company and regretting that I've not done it for myself, even when we were teeny tiny here for the last few years. But it all came about because these were all about our continual improvement projects. Because with so many improvement projects we were working on, we couldn't keep track of everything. Whereas your KPIs, you're monitoring your day-to-day standard production processes, right? So let's say that one of your KPIs, and again, I come from the quality management world. So say one of your KPIs is to have a 99.9%,
Accuracy rate.
Yeah, right. So, okay, that means that 1 in 1,000 parts we produce can have a defect. Okay, well, we can track that. If we have a high production, well, the numbers are going to stay the same, right? The percentage is going to stay the same. Well, let's say that we're really suffering on that. We're hitting like 98%. We really need to change. It's costing us lots of problems. Well, that's where you could have an OKR to come in to say, hey, we need to get it back to our 99.9. And the OKR is a short-term, one-time improvement project. Whereas that KPI is a good way to understand year over year, like you said, month over month, how are we doing? And they're boring and soulless and just, it's like, okay, well, yeah, we're doing good. We did good this year.
All right, this is what happens when I get stuck in a room with a bunch of operations guys. The KPIs and even the key measures here from a sales perspective has to be something that you use as a leading indicator. Because then you can measure early on whether or not you're going to hit your goal or not.
Right.
Like for a quality piece, there's an error there. You measure it as real time. With sales and salespeople, oftentimes it may be months before you see whether or not they're generating the results. So some of the key measures that we have there, how many meetings they set, what are their touches, what's their engagement look like. And in this world we live in today, backing that all the way up into the marketing process and looking at where it starts. Identifying where your client's buy cycle starts, and then looking when they're engaging with you early on, and then whether or not they click on your website, go down your funnel, engage with you, give you their info to download the call to action. Then does someone reach out to them within the first 30 minutes to an hour when they do that? And then when it hits our sales cycle, what do we do?
Well, that's an interesting point because some KPIs are in real time how you're doing. Right. But others, especially with sales stuff, like Lord, I know that's true. If we have a good sales month, if I'm not careful and we don't stay on top of it, we're going to have a really bad revenue month 3 to 4 months from now. Because if you don't stay on top of it, you don't see the result for months to come.
It takes there's about 3-month lag time a lot of times. What you do today dictates what your next quarter is going to look like.
Whereas the OKRs are, very different. It would be, you could have an OKR to identify these metrics.
I have them. I use them all the time. And you're always trying to refine them as well to figure out what's working best, because your objective in sales is usually some sales number.
Right.
That's pretty basic. And get into the why behind that. And
if you're screwing around with someone, how many meetings they have to have on a monthly basis, and every month it's a different number, they're going to get frustrated as heck with you.
Oh, yeah.
But you can do that with your OKRs, your improvement projects, your get shit done, right?
Yeah.
You can screw around with it and just not, well, this result's not getting us nowhere. Forget it. Remove it. Move on.
That's a very good point, because one of the challenges that we're having, we're trying to introduce, introducing little by little the Agile methodology. You guys familiar with that?
Yeah.
So we're trying to do that, but we have projects that have a different methodology, and trying to merge.
It's not easy.
Is definitely painful.
So not everyone listening knows what Agile is, and it's one of these, especially if you're in the computer development, software development world, it's the buzz term that everyone says. Lord knows if they have any idea what it means. So what's Agile mean to you?
So Agile, and I'm not an expert by any means, because I'm trying to embrace it. Agile methodology, it works in cycles, right, in the development process. So you have one PI planning that lasts a number of weeks, maybe 2 weeks. And in that period, we set some targets for the minimum valuable product. So we say, okay, this is what we're going to have to come out with. And it is, of course, it is just a set of MVPs that are going to create a product or a service. And then that is tied up to a product,
Mhm.
and then you have a project, and then you have to get the funding.
Right.
I work for a big corporation, so it is extremely painful. It is
Mhm.
it's extremely complicated to put it all together, especially at the beginning.
Mhm.
And I'm still struggling with that, to be honest with you, because and I try to embrace the new things, but I'm still struggling with that methodology.
Well, some things are like a race, and it's just a dead sprint to the finish line, right? And that's kind of the traditional production type model, whatever it is, even if it's design and development. Like, we know we need to make this product, let's just rush to the finish line. And that's where KPIs are great for measuring. But then you talk about agile, and it's kind of this circular motion, right? So we're going to do plan, development. It's the whole PDCA continual improvement cycle, the Deming cycle, right? So we're going to do our plan. We're going to do a little bit of work. We're going to check it. Now let's take an action. Do we like the direction we're going or not? If we like the direction we're going, we'll create a new plan for the next step. If we don't like the direction we're going, we're going to go back and replan this current one. And that just doesn't work real well with kind of the old school manufacturing.
You're trying a different vegetable.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can introduce Brussels sprouts.
So it is, but it's hard to mesh the two. And we've seen that here with our own software development as well. Is if you focus too hard on that agile side of things, you never get to a finish line.
Mhm.
Exactly. And one of the challenges that I have is, to your point of too many meetings, is so much concentration about the story or of how we're doing that it becomes so repetitive. It's so frustrating for the
Mhm.
doers, because at the end of the day, you have, in our case, and I was thinking about that as I was driving here, we have too many administrators and very little doers.
Yeah.
And that creates-
Why do you think that is?
It's the methodology.
It's a methodology, but I think that a lot of the processes that organizations, and even myself, I'm guilty of this, they put in places because there's been a project or something that's been tried and it didn't work the way they thought it would be, or got behind schedule. We all know most IT projects are going to come in over budget and behind schedule. It's just like one of those things, like death and taxes, right? But the reality is, in talking and listening to this, is they've pulled together a lot of methodologies that have been used over the last decades and
Mhm.
put it into one measurable piece. And because I think one of the points they make is that ideas are easy and that execution is difficult.
Right.
So all that overhang,
Mhm.
because I've been on a ton of projects and we have a bunch of that administrative stuff. And you need it because at the end of the day, it's people run these projects and they have a lot of times their own day job.
Mhm.
And the project is supplementary. So
Yes.
they're going to get pulled into other directions and working on other stuff because some other boss is on their ass about, hey, you need to work on this today too.
Yeah.
And one of I've been working with the team at Berkman. One of the things we've been working on is we have this cross-functional leadership program. And one of the hardest things for projects is trying to influence when you don't have power.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? And having the key measurement points, it gives everybody a common language that you can use to say, hey, listen, Kyle, I want to get this done. But I know Alex, where I get this key measurement, we got to get done because it's for this objective for the organization. So, I need to get it done.
Well, that's where I like that recommends that all your KPIs are public, even personal pet projects you're working on.
And to your point, more so, they have to be color coded too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I work with this guy, Joe, and whenever we've worked on some of these big projects, he's always about the heat map. He's like, Rob, we're going to put a heat map together. He's all excited about the heat map. And we have these complex project decks, and it's red, yellow, and green.
Uh-huh.
And we can look at a quick point of reference at one page and see exactly where the project is.
Yeah.
And even working with guys like at McKinsey and Tata and stuff like that over my career, they're all about the heat map and having a key. You got that one page of your deck that the CEO can look at and say, hey, well, what's going on here? Why is there so much red?
Yeah.
Doesn't even know what the project does, but just asking about the red area, like, oh, we're getting that fixed.
Yeah, one of the best things I did at corporate was I found out what probably the top 20 things that engineers would look for
Oh, I can even imagine. Only 20?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you had to prioritize, right? But I mean, it could be stuff like, how to do your timesheets, where to go for your timesheets, or what projects are we working on, or who are the new hires. One of the things I did was, and I put it all on one intranet site for them. So when they come in the morning, they turn on the computer, that's what shows up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And front and center.
So like a project dashboard.
It was our dashboard, yeah, our functional dashboard. And front and center, I put our objectives and we call them KPIs.
Yeah.
And I put mine on there as well. So we're all aligned.
Yep.
And that's scary because if you're not hitting those goals,
Yeah.
and we would use that red light, green light, yellow light system.
Oh, yeah.
And we had a lot of reds, but those are
You know where they are.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to fail on certain things because you're stretching these guys.
Yeah.
And as much as I hate to admit it, they said that if you stretch, the stretch goals motivate people. Like they want to be challenged. And yeah, you're right. 60% of a stretch goal is better than 100% of a goal.
Yeah, they call it a moonshot versus a roof shot.
Yeah.
That's key.
One of the things that I like, again, you put all this stuff public, right? And he talks about Google, and I've read this about Google before. I remember the first time I read it, I was like, what the heck? It said that Google allows each employee to dedicate 20% of their time to some pet project. And the first time I read that, I'm like, what?
Didn't 3M start that, or did Google?
I don't know who did.
All right, yeah.
And I was like, what? 20% of your week to pet projects? But if that pet project you work in is part of a more organized effort for improvement, oh, well, now suddenly that makes total sense. Now, again, if you're in a production facility, do you want your welder spending 20% of his time on some pet project? Probably not. But you might want your production supervisor and engineering crew to do that. You may still want your welder spending some time on it. There's all sorts of improvements.
They're doing 20% something else anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And having that employee that's 100% productive 100% of the time is difficult, especially in a work from home environment.
Yeah.
No comment.
But if you have these OKRs, right? And the key results are laid out really nicely, very specifically, very measurable. That's the hardest part, is to make it measurable, because we want to say, how do you put a measure on user interface? That's a fun one to put a measure on. Well, it might be, we need to conduct 20 surveys. Okay, cool. So my KPI as top management is KPI, sorry, key result is,
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, you're contagious. Is we need to conduct 20 surveys on our new user interface. But then Caleb, because he's over here running the AV for us, Caleb might have his own personal objective that says conduct 20 surveys. And one of his key results is, I need to create a survey with 10 questions to address these aspects. I need to collect it from these. I need to find customers across these multiple different industries, because maybe all the oil and gas folks love it, but the medical device folks hate it. Who knows? So it can flow down, but it doesn't have to flow down, but it can.
And I see that constantly, and that's a fundamental problem in projects. Sometimes the project management start engaging late into the game. The business had those discussions already. They know what they want. They might have selected a product.
Right.
What they need to do is bring the project management team ahead so they can do the vendor selection process. They can do the questionnaire, because that's fundamental. Understanding what product or service that we're going to be doing. And when understanding what is the problem that we're trying to solve, how we're going to do it. That's fundamental. And you'll be surprised the amount of times that is not even looked at.
No. Well, you just assume someone else is going to handle it. And if everyone has their own set OKRs for this project, or even just as general for the business, and it's all public, you can look and see, okay, who is responsible for selecting that vendor?
Yeah. What we have to remember is, in all these projects that we manage, and even our day-to-day, what you try to accomplish as an organization, the common denominator across everywhere is that there's people involved.
Yeah.
And tying people in their own desires and what they want to achieve as an individual back to the project or back to these objectives is critical in tracking that and making them aware of it, and then helping them see where their efforts help improve it is a key part of it. Because I think Brene Brown always says, at the end of the day, it's people are people and people. Yeah. That's all that matters.
I think employees now more than ever, they don't want to be told what to do.
Right.
They want to be inspired and motivated.
Appreciated.
Yeah. And they have a good analogy here with a doctor. If the doctor says, look, you need to lose some weight, go run a marathon, you're not going to do it. But if you want to run the marathon, you're way more likely to succeed doing that. So let people take this OKRs. And
it's not easy, Steve. We know.
Yeah, we're gonna edit that out. Let people create their own OKRs from the bottom up. Make sure it aligns, and they're way more likely to succeed and go through with it.
Now I can't remember which one y'all said this, but you come up with all these ideas, you stuff them in the drawer, you don't look at them again. So there were so many mixed ideas about how often to review these, right? So what have y'all seen is a good way to sit down and review company-wide, department-wide, individuals? How often do you review and measure and update?
I can give you an update, an example of how we do that. And we have, we're a corporation, right? And we're a service organization. The IT is just a organization within the upstream, downstream, and all of that, and we're a service organization.
Right.
So what we do is we have meetings, monthly meetings with the stakeholders, the product owner, and all of those, and then we analyze the progress. Very detailed progress. It's about a 2-hour meeting in which we analyze every step on the process. And
so you're going to go through every single key result.
Exactly. And we analyze the risk, but we have to go to the table with a mitigation step. I mean, risk, just like you mentioned, Steve, risk are part of what we do. And some organizations, they're risk averse.
Yeah.
So you have to be extremely careful. You have to go with a mitigation step. And that's how we define. It has to be an open conversation. It has to be transparent. You have to build your rapport with your business venture manager, the project owner. And it is that communication needs to be open and transparent.
Yeah, you talk about risk and not necessarily anything directly related to the book, but I worked with a client here a few years ago, and they were trying to get a contract with I think it was like Motorola, and so we had to do a whole slew of FMEAs, all these detailed risk analysis, hazard assessments, hazard analysis, all this stuff. And so their RPN was 60. And so if you take a look at, the likelihood, the detection, you multiply this out, like RPN is 60 is like, they had no appetite for risk at all. And it's just so tough and so tough to go after, but you have to know where they're at. And so that was what we had to do is we had to find, well, okay, how are we going to work this process so that we can demonstrate this very low risk level? Whereas on the other hand, we got another client that we worked with here just a couple of months ago, and so they're trying to get into one of these systems for it's wind turbine construction and whatnot, and no issue there. You just need the bare minimums. But yeah, you have to understand what the end client needs, and it can dramatically change the way you go after it. And risk is one of the most tricky and fickle aspects to play with.
Yeah, risk is a big deal. I know working with financial advisors over the last couple of decades, assessing your client's risk tolerance is critical in maintaining that customer.
Yeah.
And then also when you design an investment product, making sure that risk associated with it translates back to the reward, right? You don't want to have a long, short hedge fund and it's only going to rip back like 5%. You're going to be that risky. You want to have that kind of reward, right?
Yeah. But you got to know going in.
But the organizations also try to temper that. And the other piece is just like the asset management world is you're dealing with somebody else's money.
Yeah.
For public companies and stuff, you are always working with the shareholders' money. Even in a private company, you're dealing with the owner or somebody who has a vested interest to make sure you don't blow it up. Right. So it's always important to tie all that risk back and forth together. And this process of having those objectives and also those key results, and you measure it, and you have a dashboard that's color-coded that tells you where you are, It lets you know, like, hey, we're falling way behind on here. What's the downstream impact going to be? Because my project may be a precursor or a project down the path is require me. I get my stuff together, and if not, there's huge downstream impacts.
Oh yeah.
And I always look at it this way: it's like you're going to get fired. What your goal as a project manager is keep from getting fired. If you blow it up, you're going to get fired. In real simple terms.
Yeah.
Well, I was curious to ask you guys, looking forward to this about this one discussion because of some of the specific OKRs that you've done in your organizations. Because when I ask clients, hey, what's your objectives? Across almost all the time, they say, well, to make a lot of money. I said, look, that's not an objective. In fact, Jack Welch, CEO of GE, said that profits are not the objective; they're the result of doing the right things, or a byproduct.
Yeah.
And I had used in corporate the balanced scorecard method.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
So, and what it was Kaplan and Norton were these two researchers, and when they asked the executives what they're focused on, they said financial almost all the time. But then they found out something interesting that executives that had a different focus on other things like the customer, like obviously internal processes, innovation, learning within their company, were by far more successful than those that just looked at the one thing. So, can you give me some examples that the audience can take home and start using for their companies?
Well,
I know one that I've used a lot of times, and to your point about the customers, is the Net Promoter Score. Just one question: would you recommend me to recommend me to a friend or a client or somebody else you know? And you measure where that is. It's super simple, and that tells you whether or not those customers are getting what they need is working with the organization.
Yeah, that's a great one to use.
Well, we sat down, when we did this here a few weeks ago, we set one of these stretch goals. I guess if Jim Collins called BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, we probably need to review one of his many, probably good to great at some point.
Yes, we should.
Good to great.
But our stretch goal is 10,000 clients. I mean, I know that sounds absolutely insane, but that's kind of the goal. So, right now we're probably at 100. Okay, so let's get that to 10,000. How are we going to do that? Okay, well, we've got some measures lined out. And so the way that flowed as we were going through the process, we're getting terrible conversion rate on our website. Well, why is that? Well, the call to action is hard to find. The mobile page is hard to use. Oh, well, here's one new objective. We need a new website. Here's the key results.
And you are your harshest critic, so it's not terrible. There's always room for improvement. Just since this is going to millions of viewers.
Yes, I want the click-through rate to be much, much higher than it is.
What's your click-through rate now?
About 1.4.
It's pretty good.
I want 10.
Well,
no, really.
How are we going to have on the other side of your call to action?
If we can get it up above 5, I'm going to be absolutely thrilled.
That'd be outstanding.
Because
you'd be able to write a case study on that.
We should. That would be fun. Because if we get to 1,000 hits a month. Well, if I'm getting 1,000 hits a month, daggum, that should be enough to get enough leads to keep the doors open. Without having to go out and do the cold calling and whatnot. Just in case, that was just one of them. Like, if we're going to hit these 10,000 clients, okay, well, the first thing we need is more traffic coming through the website. Yeah. And that spawned its own objective and its own key results.
Yeah. So about your question, Steve, I was thinking, okay, what is that we do on OKRs? And what we try to do is, because it's a corporation, because everybody has different recipe to take on that, right? Corporation, massive corporation, global presence, and everything else, we need to start from the mission and vision. And for my projects, I usually try to say, hey, you know what? Let's create our own mission and vision. And even down below, create your individual mission and vision.
Yeah.
Because that way we understand what is that we're doing. What is the challenge that we're facing?
We did a podcast episode on, I can't remember which one it was. But, they've got, of course, a company quality policy, right? But then every single department wrote their own policy that was in alignment, maybe not the same, but in alignment with the company policy. And I just absolutely loved the idea. And it was, it was a great case study. And it was really fun to see. But that is, it gets folks on on board with the program. Like, I think you were saying, Steve, it's like people don't want to be told what to do. They want to decide it for themselves. Okay. Well, how do you give them the tools to make those decisions that are in alignment with the company goals?
Set parameters.
Yeah. Well, that's something else that I found works real well also is if you've got, a good motivated person, right? You don't want to tell them what to do. You just want to give them a box to work within. Here's the boundaries. You can't go outside of this. And here's some very, very minimal. Like we were doing this when you walked in, right? And so we're talking about this new aspect for the software. And I basically said, look, I really don't care the solution we use to get there, but we need to have a single page that folks go to for the self-service module. Beyond a single page for self-service module, I don't care at all how you do it. You go figure it out. But if you can build a good box for someone to work within, and you put a good, creative, innovative person on it, oh my gosh, you get way more fantastic of a solution than you ever could have come up with on your own.
You have to empower those guys.
Yeah.
And that's that's the one thing that I really like about Agile methodology, going back to that, because the team is supposed to be empowered to make decisions and make it happen.
Yeah.
The problem is at the end of the cycle, then you have to go back and do a check.
Yeah. I think what you guys are touching on there, and one of the quotes I heard going through this was Microsoft doesn't hire smart people to tell them what to do. They hire smart people for them to tell us what to do.
Right.
That's a great point.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So what are some other, I guess, takeaways or things you really loved about the book? Because again, this book, while new, these ideas are not.
Yeah, it's kind of a conglomeration of taking management by objective and all this stuff. It's SMART goals and everything. I'll put it together a nice digestible package, really.
Yeah.
Because things over time continue to get better. I think that's what John did. He's kind of put his own spin on a lot of the practices he's used over the last couple decades.
Yeah. No, I agree. And this is something I haven't even thought too much about till just recently, but quality world. You have to have your policy and objectives, right? When you go into an audit, the first three things an auditor is going to look at is, let's see, last year's audit report. Did you fix everything you were supposed to fix last year? Let's look at your policy. Let's look at your objectives and how you're doing for them. And those objectives are typically identical year after year after year. These are the standard KPIs. But why couldn't some of these stretch OKRs also be in the objective? Now, that's something that'll be fun to explain to an ISO auditor because they want to see compliant or not compliant, and maybe trying to explain that 70% is okay. But might be difficult, might be a little difficult, but it's a fun concept to explore.
It depends on your industry and what you do.
Yes.
Like 99% accuracy rate may be good in your business, but it's really not good for Southwest.
Right.
If 1% of all their planes crash or their flights crashed in a year, that'd be a lot.
Well, and I've had it before as well, where some of our clients, maybe they're regularly involved in design and development, and they don't have a repeatable product that they're putting out. Well, how do you judge customer satisfaction? How do you judge on time? Because these are the common ones, right? There's 4 or 5 ways to track customer satisfaction. I've got a YouTube video on it. How do you track on-time delivery? How do you track accuracy? These are easy when you have a repeatable process. But if you're doing something different for half your customers, you throw all that out the window. Quality objectives become very, very difficult. And I'm just sitting here thinking my gosh, this could be the solution for those few clients that don't have that repeatable of a process.
I'm in the training and development world. It's not that's really hard to measure satisfaction. You may be able to look at ROI of a team or a project team, like how well they were working together, than how they're working together now, but it's hard to measure.
Yeah, so there's a fine line between the production and the quality of the product or the service, right? So that's something that sometimes you concentrate too much on quantity at the expense of quality, and that's not the right way to go.
Yeah, I've managed phone centers before, and we'd always pound on the sales people, keep your call times to a certain length. Then we started listening to the calls, and when they saw their time run out, they're rushing through the call and just pissing off the customer.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes, the customers aren't all the same. Some of them I'll use a stereotypical New Yorker. He wants to get on the phone, get his information, get off. And then we have this guy, Gordon, who is a good old boy from Waco. He's a little bit more like relaxed in his approach. Talk to me, tell me what's going on. Where are you working these days? Like, what's happening? You're 10 minutes into the damn call before you even get down to business, because he's got to talk about like cattle futures or something like that first. So to your point, the measurement of quantity versus quality is difficult and subjective.
Right.
And one of the things we found over time was like, all right, we're going to look at it an average and know that there's going to be some that are over and some that are under.
There was a great example of that in this book about Google and YouTube.
Yes.
Where they thought that having the number of views was the right objective.
Yes. This is a fantastic example.
Yeah. And so the way they were doing their ad revenue was at the start of every video, there would be that little advertisement.
Right.
That's how they get the revenue. But the CEO, Susan Wojcicki,
Something like that. Yeah.
she said, no, it's viewer time. So how long someone looks at the video, they're happier, and that creates more ad revenue.
Right.
And people didn't agree, but they tested out, and she was right. And we all know how huge YouTube is now.
Right. Well, that's probably where 3/4 of our viewers will be.
YouTube.
Yes. And then TikTok just like buried it, and like now everything's on 60 seconds.
That'll be our next one.
Right.
And then for us, we were very analytical in our company, so we had all sorts of these metrics and said we want to be a really safe company.
Right.
So how do we do that? And we found that the more observations, hazard observations that we have, and that could be both positive observations, negative. Mostly we think of it in terms of negative observations, but like, there's a tripping hazard here, so they write up a card. Well, it can also be good things. Hey, Rob did a really good job working with Alex on this activity, and those vessels, we had a lot of offshore vessels, construction vessels. Those vessels that had more observations had a better safety record, had less incidents. It was inversely proportional. And I would have thought it was the opposite. You have so many observations because everything's going wrong. You have more incidents. That wasn't the case. So once we learned that, we started putting in motive incentives to have people make more observations.
I completely agree. Like, this is something that I'm really passionate about, that I wish we could get more clients on board with, and I've not found the best way to sell it, I guess. And as I sell it, I don't actually make anything extra off of it. It's just a good way to do business. We call it a good catch card. It's the same idea, right? Because when someone writes up a nonconformity, people take that nonconformance report as a personal write-up, as a disciplinary action or a precursor to disciplinary action.
Sometimes they are.
Sometimes, but the majority of the time, we just need to note that something went wrong or there was an opportunity for improvement. But when you turn it into this long, drawn-out process, like I was on site recently with a client, and they have this one page. It's pink so that you can see it easy, but it's a page full of text you have to fill out. I'm like, no one's going to.
Do they have to wear that on their back for the day? they tape it on them? The scarlet letter. You caused this quality issue.
And it's like, man, I'm not going to fill this out. They wanted me to even fill it out before I left. I'm like, come guys, this is going to take me like 15 minutes to fill out. Like, I'm ready to go. So what we've got is what we call a good catch card. It's like this little yellow card. What is the problem or potential problem? And what do you propose as a solution?
Love it. I'm going to steal that. I'm stealing that all day.
And
it's already stolen.
Yeah. And then you put your name,
have a copy
you
before
put
I
your
leave?
date. I'll give it to you. And you turn it in. And so what I've tried to tell folks is because we want to get more of these. The more people notice hazards, the more people notice opportunities for nonconformity, the less they actually occur. Because it's stuff that people don't pay attention to that causes problems. And so what I've suggested to folks, maybe you guys get some advice on this, is, folks aren't just going to fill out the card, because most people aren't going to fill out the card out of the goodness of their heart. They want something for it. And so what I've always suggested is, let's just do like a $25 gift, Chick-fil-A gift card at the end of the month. If you turn your card in every week, you're entered into the drawing for it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you make it okay on.
Yeah. There's 2 points on that. You have those people who may be extrinsically motivated. Those are the ones who want the gift card.
Yeah.
You get some of those people who are intrinsically motivated. they're going to want a good data boy or recognition.
Right.
So I would recommend in that you kind of do a little bit of both, personal or public recognition, either on a board or something like that, and you can throw in a little gift card as well.
Well, and then if your suggestion for improvement got incorporated into a corrective action, like maybe you get something for
A
that
piece of the savings.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
That's an interesting
Mhm.
idea. Easy to sell to the employees, hard to sell to the owners, but
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
And I think that a lot of what you're talking about is that concept of positive psychology that Seligman and now the happiness equation, all those guys bring to the table, whereas you're tracking the positives versus the negatives.
Yeah.
And I think,
And if you can put the negatives in the light of a positive,
oh yeah,
Mhm.
and let them kind of like self-regulate the stuff, especially when we're dealing with intergenerational organizations. When you have a lot of 20-somethings in an organization, they're not like the same breed as my forebears were in the public world, where you were okay to just get like publicly scolded and beat physically. Like now it's a kinder and gentler workforce, and thank God it is. But you want to be able to make it fun and keep everybody happy, and you don't win the best places to work by just pounding the shit out of people all day.
Well, this book could have been called "How to Create a Good Culture,"
yeah,
because you're talking to people constantly, giving them feedback and challenging people, making them feel important. So that's what having. I was debating: is it because Intel had a good culture that OKRs worked, or was having OKRs the important recipe for having a good culture? And I think they probably go hand in hand.
probably makes
Yeah.
both.
Culture's
Yeah.
so hard.
It is.
Yeah, it is. It is. And if you think about the workforce today, how it used to be 20 years ago. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, you go into a company and you say, you know what, I'm going to stay here
Mhm.
as long as I can. And today, no, the millennials are switching jobs.
And it's been, to your point, like I was just watching something about this last night. COVID has accelerated that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now with COVID, now people are like, you know what? For the last year, I was locked in my house at the fear of death that somebody's going to breathe on me. I'm going to catch this disease and die. It messes with your psyche. It's like this is like a generational forming event, and
Sure.
people now are like, I am not going to go work for a company that doesn't appreciate me when I can work anywhere else in the country.
Exactly.
And you have these people now selling their houses, moving in a van, working remotely from a van down by the river, where like 20 years ago, if I was living in a van down by the river, my family would be upset. But like, oh, Robert's living in a van down by the river. Motivational speaker, right? But like, no, nowadays it's like, yeah, you could. There's like, how many YouTube videos can you find about people converting their van into like a camper?
A lot of them.
A ton.
Yeah.
A ton.
Well, the book we did last month, the first 90 days, I think it was what he said. On average, people switch jobs or positions at least 1.8 years.
Yeah, it's a ton.
Like, so imagine that accelerated now. Like,
And-
holy crap. Yeah.
And now people won't take it. They're like, I'm going to quit. There was a article in the Wall Street Journal. I can find it so you can link it to the
Send it to
the
me. I'll
podcast
put it in
stuff.
the notes.
And it's recent. More people have been quitting their jobs in the last 6 months to a year than has ever been seen on record.
Yeah.
They're just done. Like, I quit. I'll do whatever.
Well, you say that, like, I'm thinking about the conversations I've had with the clients recently. I think I've talked to 3 different people in the last month where their quality managers up and left, went somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's that. I hadn't put those pieces together, but you're right.
Yeah.
They're switching and moving a lot more readily than they did before.
And those folks oftentimes have to be on site, so they can't live in a van down by the river.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. I guess I'm what they call an elder millennial, right? And it's not just the millennials, of the new ones. Now we've got the Gen Zs coming into the workforce now, and they've been absolutely raised on IT.
I'll share a story with you. I was talking to, I guess it's Gen Z. I don't really track it that close, but I was telling the guy, hey, that's a lot like Ferris Bueller. And he looks at me like, Ferris who? I'm like, oh my God. And then I had to pull up the video. We're looking at the video. And he goes, that was what, 96? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I wasn't even born yet. I'm like, oh my God.
life moves at you pretty fast.
Oh,
That's
That's
right.
one of my favorite smoothies, by the way.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess we probably need to wrap up. This has gone by really quick, but I guess it happens when you're having fun. Any final comments from you guys? Any advice for folks listening to this?
I would say it's not easy to do, but it's critical for your organization. And the fact of the matter is, read the book, get a feel for it, and implement what you can. I don't think you have to do it exactly as the book says, but make it your own. Like, own it.
I agree, and it's a simple enough idea that if you want to add little quirks and twists to it, go for it. It's not like this is a very formal methodology.
No.
Okay. Be open to new ideas. I will say yes. Objectives, they have to be ambitious. They have to be inspiring, but they also must be specific and clear.
Yes.
So they can be measured.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is much more of the improvement process of your organization than your day-to-day functions. Now, it will influence day-to-day, but this is about continually improving your organization.
Absolutely.
And if you're working with guys that just say, I just want to get shit done.
Right.
They say, we're just too busy to do goal setting.
Yes.
I would say, like, no, you can't do goal setting, not because you're too busy. You're too busy because you're not doing goal setting. So this is very important.
Yeah. The get shit done was that was the selling point. I mean, my gosh, it was a turning point for us.
And for those folks, that's their behavior style, that's their mindset on how they like to do things. That oftentimes only represents maybe 25% of the people in the organization.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other people that want to have that personal touch, and they're more like idealistic about the things that they need to do. So you're going to be careful about that.
Sure.
And we talk about all the diversity and inclusion and everything else. You're going to include people of different styles as well to make sure they all come together.
That's the kind of the point you made earlier. Is Alex is why different response to the exact same ideas. So I think that's kind of a good point to end it on. This is kind of what we all say is make it your own, and definitely you got to be careful about how you do it. So
all right,
that's it, guys. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you next month.
All right. Hopefully I'm not in a van down by the river.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, good conversation, guys.
Yeah.